21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
From my perspective, you should be building a personal brand before you actually need it. Because by the time you need it, if you're then trying to monetize your audience, your crowd, your people, there's a saying, your vibe attracts your tribe, right? And I 100% believe that. And, I started building my personal brand and my audience 8 years before I ever needed to even remotely think about monetizing them in any way, shape, or form. That was through my podcast, through my LinkedIn posts, through Reddit posts, et cetera, through many different channels. And I'm hoping in the benefits that have accrued to me, both as an entrepreneur, but also as a digital nomad, and who's somebody who likes to live a very freedom-filled life. I would not be able to do anything that I do today if I didn't have a strong personal brand, or I would have to spend such a massive amount of money doing marketing for my services that I probably wouldn't have the business that I have today. I have to thank Gary Vee, because 8, 9, 10 years ago when I first started listening to him, one of his common sayings that he used to say 1,000 times, it felt like 1,000 times a day, he would say, well, if you think you're a thought leader, put your thoughts out into the world and let the market decide. And I finally, after hearing that 1,000 times, I finally took that to heart. And I was actually an employee of a company at that time. I was working inside of a brand as the e-commerce manager within the company. And so, it wasn't like I was trying to sell services, or I wasn't even trying to sell me as such. What I was trying to do is I had the firm belief, and I still do, that a rising tide floats all boats. And if I can share what I know, and I can help our industry get better, then that expands the pie for all of us, including me. And I'm always confident enough. I'm always going to get my share of the pie. If my intent is right, if my intent is good, if my intent is pure, I will always get my share of the business pie. I just need to be doing the right things in the right ways with the right intent, and things usually work out for themselves. I've never been, in my entire professional career, I have never been someone that has chased the money. Always in the roles, even when I've worked for other people, it's been learning first, earning second. And what I have found throughout my entrepreneurial career, now I've now been involved in the starting up and running of 3 different companies now in my life. And what I've learned throughout this time is that if you do good work and you meet a genuine need and you treat people right, money is the byproduct of doing all those things. You will be successful. Whereas if you chase the money, if that's the primary goal, oftentimes you will not make money. That is the paradoxical thing about entrepreneurship. If the sole goal, the sole purpose, or the primary purpose of what you are doing in the world is to make money, oftentimes that will not be the case. One of the goals behind starting my podcast was actually not to build my business or my personal brand on the back of it. It was actually to be able to open the door for conversations with people much smarter than myself in many instances, especially on topics that I'm not an expert in. So technically speaking, my podcast is called The E-commerce Edge, and it's focused very much on e-commerce, but it's also a general business and entrepreneurship podcast. It's about how can I bring in specialists? How can we have really unique conversations that are enjoyable, entertaining, fun, educational, and how can we help people, even people that maybe are not that interested in e-commerce as a topic? How can we make better business people? How can we build better entrepreneurs? And how can we give people more freedom to live the life that they want to live? I have been so blessed in my life. If I didn't work in the area of e-commerce, I'm not sure that I could be the digital nomad that I am. I'm not sure that I could have moved to Mexico a year and a half ago if I didn't work in this industry. So my podcast is very much a love letter back to my industry. It's a shout of thanks back to my industry for the life it has allowed me to create. And after doing this for 24 years, for working in this industry for 24 years, I want to be able to share what I know, all the hard-fought lessons that I have accrued over the last 24 years. I want to share those with the world, and I also want to create a platform for people who wouldn't otherwise have a voice in our industry. I want to provide them a platform to be able to share their knowledge with the world. And so that's what I'm trying to do through my podcast. And I'm fond of saying that, if you slide into someone's DMs on LinkedIn and say, oh, you seem to like you're interested in e-commerce, or you work in e-commerce, would you like to have a virtual coffee for 15 minutes? 99% of the time, the answer is going to be no, because they think you are trying to sell to them. Whereas if I slide into their DMs and I have a podcast, and now that I've got over 400 episodes, when I ask them, I say, hey, look, you're obviously interested in similar things to me. It seems like you've got some really deep expertise on this topic. I would love to host you on my podcast so that we can chat about it. And 99% of the time they say yes instead. And so that podcast becomes a vehicle to have very rich conversations and to get to know people better and more deeply. My podcast episodes tend to run between 45 minutes and an hour. So that is deep enough and long enough. We do not feel rushed. We can go into topics in great detail, and we can have great conversations. And what many people might not know is that for my podcast, I do zero prep. I literally, maybe 5 minutes before I go on to the call, I'll go to their LinkedIn profile, I'll go to their website, make sure I understand broadly about their background and what their platform or technology or service does. And then we just converse. And I base those conversations on my knowledge and understanding of the industry. And what I've been told is that as a result of that, because it's not pre-scripted and pre-planned to the nth degree, those conversations come off as very authentic, and we cover topics oftentimes that the guests have never talked about before. I get the opportunity now to work across a broader range of businesses than ever before in my consulting work. And one of the reasons why I'm able to do that is because I've been doing this for so long. So now in my consulting business, which I started 4 years ago, I've been working in the e-commerce and omni-channel space for over 24 years now. But, I wouldn't say I was getting bored, but I certainly was, I think, extracting as much value as I could out of that merchant cohort and consulting directly to merchants. But what I discovered 2 years ago was that there were other cohorts of customers that wanted to work with me too. And I had people reaching out to me that were agencies. I had investors reaching out to me. I had platform vendors reaching out to me and saying, hey, do you do consulting for people like us? I know you work with merchants. I know you help them. I know you help them, do their tech selection, do their solution engineering. I know you help them to, improve their processes, their organizational design. But do you do that for clients like us that work in the industry, but we're an investor. We want to invest maybe in an e-commerce technology, or oh great, we're trying to build this agency. You've built agencies before. Could you come help us build our agency? And so my advice to entrepreneurs is that you may not need to pivot to be successful, but what you may need to do is you may need to expand your services to immediate adjacencies. Now, what that meant for me was that I needed to develop additional consulting frameworks to be able to service that new type of client, because my initial consulting framework was all built around how to accelerate digital success for B2B e-commerce merchants, people that were selling B2B, and how to help them do that better, faster, smarter, etc. So I needed to adapt my frameworks for this new type of client. So it forced me to expand my knowledge. It forced me to expand my ability to consult more broadly. And so it was interesting. It was challenging. It brought a new energy to what I was doing as a business, because now all of a sudden I had to do something different to what I had been doing for the prior, 20 years. So this is a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it thoroughly. My advice to any entrepreneur out there is you may not need to pivot, but you may need to expand to adjacencies to really, give yourself the most opportunities possible, especially in a downturn. If you only service one market and that market dries up, well, man, you better have other strings to your bow. Otherwise, it's going to be really challenging. And currently, just as a side note, currently, I have more non-merchant clients today than I have merchant clients. So if I hadn't added those adjacencies 2 years ago, I don't know, my business might be really challenged today. It's really interesting, this concept of mindset, but I think that there's plenty of motivational speakers that speak to mindset, and they speak to environment, and they speak to process, and getting up at 5 a.m. and having a cold plunge and starting with an iced coffee, and all, they've got these routines, right? You can listen to Huberman, you can listen to, there's 1,000 motivational speakers, Wim Hof, and there's 1,000 of those guys out there, right? And I'm in most instances, they have some very, very good things to say that can work for many people. But I oftentimes think what is overlooked is heart set. And so I think that you have to look holistically if you're going to be successful, right? And I mean holistically successful here. I mean, sure, you might be successful just with mindset in your business sphere, but what will suffer in the process? If you are myopic and you only look at your life through one lens, i.e. professional or commercial success, then what will suffer in the process? Will my family suffer? Will my religion, if I have a religious belief, will that suffer? Will my health suffer because I'm not looking after my health? There's all sorts of other things in life that we need to have fulfilled to be a well-rounded and happy individual. Rarely does success in one area of our life mean that we will automatically be successful in other areas of our life. Now, yes, success can spill over and can influence other areas of our life, but I think the most important thing that I've learned is that whatever I do, I need to do it with intention. I need to do it with a plan. Now, that plan may not work out, and I may have to adjust the plan. But if I just go through life and let life happen to me, then I will probably not end up where I had hoped I would end up. And many people that I talk to, they don't actually have a vision of where they see themselves or where they would like to see themselves in 2, 5, 10 years. They go, well, I'd like to have a little bit more money. I'd like to have a little bit more freedom. I'd like to have a little bit bigger house, maybe a nicer car, but they don't get specific with where they see their life, ideally in a 2 to 5 to 10 year time span. And I think for me, that is something that has been very important to my success. And of course, I've had to change plans and course correct along the way in many instances where maybe something didn't work out the way I'd intended or planned, but that's normal. That's life. That's called life happening to you. But my mother used to have a saying, and she used to say it to me when I was young all the time. And this is something that stuck with me. I'm almost 50 years old. It has stuck with me since I was a little kid. She said, if you aim at nothing, you will hit it every single time. It's interesting. My philosophy can probably be summed up in terms of like social responsibility or empathy or whatever it is. It can probably be summed up in one simple phrase. You have to put your own mask on first. Basically, if you are not happy, you cannot give from an empty cup. I have learned that about myself. I'm probably more from the Ayn Randian school of, self-help, where it's like you got to look after yourself first. You have to look after your own finances. You have to look after your own family. But I tell you, one of the things that I have learned, because I've now lived in 3 different countries and traveled to many more. I grew up in Southern California, spent almost 30 years in New Zealand, have now been living in Mexico for the last year and a half. What I have learned is that if you really want to develop empathy, instead of watching it on TV or watching a clip on YouTube of a down and out society or, people that are being hard done by, you have to go and live in those communities and you have to see the world through their lens to really, if you really want to have empathy, it's almost impossible to do that from afar. You actually have to live alongside these people. You have to walk a mile in their shoes, literally. Our friend group here in Puebla, for example, it's like 90% Mexicano. So we haven't gone out of our way to mix only with expats. We haven't gone out of our way to only mix with Americans and Canadians and Kiwis and Aussies, because there's plenty of those here. And my wife is Asian, so it would be easy. There's some Asians here as well. It would be easy for us to focus on the communities that are easy for us to blend into and fit in with. We have intentionally gone out of our way to make friends with locals because we want to become locals. We want to live like a local. We want to be in the community. And there's another very important life lesson that I learned from being in Mexico and living here now for a year and a half. The hierarchy of needs or priorities here in Mexico is very different to what it is in the United States and in New Zealand and Australia. In New Zealand, Australia, let's just call it the Commonwealth plus the US. In those countries, the celebration of the individual is almost total. And as a result of that, there is an underlying level of selfishness that is endemic to the society. It's built in, right? Individual achievement is put up on a pedestal, collective achievement is not. Here in Mexico, because it's 82% Roman Catholic, they have a hierarchy of priorities here that looks something like this: God, family, community, in that order, okay? Now, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're religious or not, is kind of irrelevant. The reality is that because there is such a dominant religion operating in this country, that creates a natural level of cohesion and focus that is missing in many other cultures, right? Obviously there are some other cultures that are religiously led too, but here, because 82% of the culture is focused on one religion and one belief system, it definitely creates a stickiness. That means that when we were traveling around the country, there were more stray dogs than people sleeping under bridges. I have a tremendous amount of respect for that. One of the great privileges of my life is not only being able to live in other countries, but the amount of global travel that I've done historically, and I continue to do as much as I possibly can to develop and hone and strengthen that empathy gene that I naturally have inside me. But one of the other benefits that is oftentimes overlooked in extensive travel and living outside of your birth country is the amount of business experience and the business aspect, the commercial aspect of a culture. Because every culture is different, right? In the way that it operates, in the way that it does business, in the way that it communicates, in the way that it does deals, in the way that it perceives value. Every country and culture is a little bit different in that way. Even if they speak English, they will still oftentimes have a very different view of how business should be done. And I'll give you one example here in Mexico, and I will help spin that out into an overall business impact that it's had on my business, as well as my ability to service customers globally at a much higher level than I would otherwise. So here in Mexico, niceties, meaning politeness, is highly, highly valued. So, my traditional American way in an email would typically be very short, very to the point, not too many niceties, not too many flowery words. We're talking business here. We're going to get right to the point. Hey, John, referring to our meeting last week, here's the information you requested, kind of thing. That would be my normal American, cut to the chase, right? Meat and potatoes, get to the point, right? In Mexico, if you do that, you are considered rude, right? There is an expectation that you will say, hey, Mr. Gonzalez, whatever it might be, hope you're having a nice day. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope your kids and your dog are nice, whatever it might be. Just referring back to those questions you had for me the other day, I wanted to chase those up for you because you had asked, and I'm coming back to you as promised. Here's the information you requested. If you've got any questions, feel free to revert back to me, and I'll be happy to schedule another call, right? So there is this expectation that you will be more respectful, that you will not be all business. Mexicans in particular, well, most Latin Americans in general, they want to know a little bit more about you personally before they will choose to do business with you. And so I have, luckily, because I've been exposed to many different cultures other than the American culture, there are many cultures that actually will not do business with you unless they like you. And, of course, in America, people like to do business with people they like. But literally, unless you are somewhat vulnerable in many cultures outside of the US, and unless you are willing to share what is going on in your personal life, oh, I'm married, oh, I'm from here, oh, I grew up here, oh, I went to school here, oh, I've got a dog, oh, what kind of dog is he? Cool. Unless you are willing to have those types of human level conversations, in many countries, people will simply choose not to do business with you because they feel like you've got something to hide. And this means that they automatically have a distrust of you. So trust building in cultures outside of America in particular is essential, and it means a level of vulnerability that lots of people are simply not comfortable with. I'm incredibly vulnerable. If you want to learn more about me, I talk about a lot of personal stuff on my podcast, over 400 episodes. Go and check out the podcast, The E-commerce Edge. If you want to learn more about me, go to LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I post there almost every single day. I try to be as vulnerable as I possibly can. If you want to learn more about my business and the kind of services I provide, I work specifically with B2B brands, so businesses selling to businesses, and I help them to go through a very planned and intentional digital transformation process so that they can expand the channels that they sell through, including digital channels. So if they want to check that out, greenwoodconsulting.net. They can go and learn more about me there. It's got all my contact details. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. And I love, even if you choose not to work with me, if you just want to have a yarn, if you just want to have a discussion about business, e-commerce, traveling the world, being a digital nomad, AI, kind of almost any topic that you're interested in that is at the nexus of business, technology, entrepreneurship, and travel, I'm your man. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to chat to you.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Imagine a space where triumphs, trials, and tales of entrepreneurship come alive. Welcome to the 21st Century Entrepreneurship Podcast, a gold awarded journey hosted by Martin Piskarik, connecting with listeners in 95 countries and ranking in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Join our exclusive community, elevate your perspective, and embark on the path to success.